Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, the viewers of this video. Today I'm going to give a small tutorial to the Rust programming language, the language that I mostly use by these days. So, if you haven't known about Rust yet, Rust is the mainstream kit on the street that is used by pretty much every companies, and is being adopted in many companies such as Google, Amazon, Discord, Dropbox, and a lot of companies. It's being used recently, was integrated to the Linux kernel, and was made uh, an alternative language of programming in Android compared to C++. So what is Rust? Why do people like Rust so much? So Rust is a high-level programming language that emphasizes on performance, type safety, and concurrency. It has this thing called memory safety that is one of the most powerful thing in Rust. Rust's memory safety is a guarantee that developers don't need to care about managing their memory. So, like for examples on programming languages like C, C++, you'd need to manage your memory. Like when you have a value and you used it, you, for example, allocated it with malloc, and then at the end you must free that memory. If not, that causes a memory leak. And a lot happens with something like type traces when different threads and concurrent threads are like not in sync and kind of uh, modifies a value that causes them to do some unexpected behavior. For example, we have two threads. The first thread would access a variable to edit it, but as the second thread views the variable, that variable hasn't been edited by the other thread, so it would seem as the variable hasn't been something like processed by the first thread. So the second thread uses the old version of the variable, and the first thread updates it, which causes a data race. That's what we call as a data race. This memory safety is not with cost though. It doesn't have a garbage collector or reference counting like programming language should have on Java or something like Go. Garbage collector basically is a method of managing memory automatically. For example, you'd have a variable allocated, but then that variable isn't used anymore, so it gets dropped automatically. It works, but it kind of takes a lot more processing power and kind of takes a bit of a hit on the performance. So this interesting approach to Rust, this interesting memory safety of Rust, is by using borrow checker. So the borrow checker is a kind of a complex concept if you haven't kind of understood more about it, but I'll talk about it a bit later. But let's first kind of talk about the history of Rust. Rust is made by this person called Graydon Hall. He was kind of bored and he works at Mozilla. He had this intention of creating a language that has something like a borrow checker. So he made it, and somehow it became famous. At the time, it got funded by the Mozilla project, the company that he was working for. But then he got out of Mozilla and worked on this language on his own. And then years after years of development, like 12 years to be exact, Rust has become one of the biggest, fastest growing language in the world, as viewed on the Stack Overflow developer survey. Rust has been the most loved programming language for years in Stack Overflow's developer surveys, annual developer surveys to be exact. It has been in development for like 12 years, and it is cross-platform, so you could use the same language on different platforms like Windows, Linux, Mac OS without any much issues. So, I guess without further ado, let's kind of take a kickstart this program language. First, you'd open this website called ruststriplang.org, and you'll see at the top this Get Started button. You click it, and you'll be prompted with this kind of installing page. If you're on Linux or Mac OS or any Linux-like OS, you could run this on a terminal, like copy and then paste it in your terminal. But I've already got mine installed. So as you got installed this, so Rust, it's not like Rust you installed the compiler of Rust. Rust has a tool called RustUp. RustUp is the thing that manages Rust applications. So I'd have RustUp, and you could kind of see RustUp is like the manager of toolchains. So here I have x86 and Wasm32. targets, and active choosing like this Anorex GNU stable and sort of stuff. This Rust app tool is usually used to manage your toolchain for like you want to try the unstable version of Rust, or maybe you want to try the nightly version of Rust C, or you may want to add some new targets, for example ARM64, AR64 for Android. Also, Rust has a package manager called Cargo. This Cargo package manager is used to manage packages because you wouldn't have it's not like C where you would just write the C code in one file and just forget about it. Rust has a special package manager itself called Cargo, and here you could manage packages like to separate different codes and kind of combine them together. There's this thing called crates.io from Rust that hosts many different Rust packages that you can use, something like an npm or something like an npm JS for JavaScript. So this contains a lot of libraries that you could download and add to your Rust projects, like random stuff, CLI, asynchronous, everything pretty much you could download from here. And this is the thing that's awesome about Rust, it has its own package manager, so you won't need to worry about a lot of issues or dependency stuff, and it just makes life easier. So right now we're just going to create a new Rust project. You just run Cargo. As you've installed Rust up and installed Cargo, you could you do Cargo new and then the name. I'm going to call it my app. We create a binary application, my app, I guess. When you ls, you'd see this my app folder. When you cd to it, you'd see this file called cargo.toml and source, and you can see that it has set up a Git repository for you. In here, this cargo.toml is like the manifest of the Rust project, so it manages stuff like packages, like your package metadata, some like name, description, repository, license, and the actual authors of this package. You can edit it, the cargo file. Really simple, but you could see a lot more stuff here, like see more keys and definitions. So I click this, you can see a lot more like fields that you could put in this thing, like name, package documentation, all of that sort of stuff you need. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention you that the Rust programming language is one of the most loved, is probably because it has really great documentation. When you're starting Rust, I recommend you to read the book, usually called the Rust book. It is very thorough. It like walks you through the every features of the language, every corners of the language, and it's just this one book. And I learned Rust mostly from this. If you like reading books though. So yeah, as you see this manifest format, you can see maybe I won't try to add an authors, so I'd add myself here. I've added myself to the authors. So in here, as you can see, there's not just package. This package contains something like the metadata of the package, and there's more like these things in TOML are called tables. This is the dependency table. There's a lot of stuff in Cargo that you could really do, so like the specifying dependencies, for example. You could put a dependency from crates.io, and then it would automatically install the package for you. For example, you copy this time dependency from the documentation, placed it in this cargo.toml file, and then ran cargo. Cargo run. So this cargo run command compiles your Rust app and downloads its necessary dependencies. And since it's kind of taking a bit long for this crates.io to download, so let's wait for a bit. So as we can see, as we build, Cargo updates its crates.io index, something like downloading a dictionary of packages from crates.io, and it downloaded the library that we specified and its dependency called libc. As you can see, we've downloaded it and compiled some stuff. So I actually run cargo build rather than cargo run. So cargo build is like building the project with its required dependencies, and cargo run is like running the main file, which I haven't talked about it yet. So let's kind of talk about that The source code lies on the src so directory, as you can see here. We have the main.rs file that you can edit. This is the Rust code that we can do. So let's open this. What this code basically does is just it prints this hello world text. As we can do it from cargo run, it automatically compiles the code and runs it for you. Hello world. You can change this to anything you want. Oh, not WQ. You can cargo run, it builds itself and it changes the value. This is the simplest Rust code that you can find. So let's kind of break down of the Rust programming language. As if you can see, the Rust programming language is pretty much the same as any languages. It has the same fundamentals. This is a function, and this is a function called main with 0 arguments, and it has this curly brace denoting a block statement, and there's this statement called print line. And if you see a bit clearer, there's this exclamation symbol after the print line. This denotes that this is not a function. It is actually something called macro in Rust. And yes, you can do macros in Rust. So let's kind of get the basics first. You can define a variable like any other variables in a programming language using the word let. You could set it to something like age 100. And then to print that age, it's kind of a bit complicated than the languages that you usually used to. It uses print line as before, the macro with the exclamation mark. But you don't just append. Sorry, you don't just You don't just append age. So like my age equals this. This won't work because Rust doesn't work like that. To concatenate different values together, you would use something like formatting. If you're a bit familiar with C or something, similar languages that does that. So you'd need something like this. My age equals curly brace and age. So we save this file. Then we run this. My age is 100. Very cool. So what if you have multiple values? Like you'd have what? My number, so like that. I'd have 54. I don't know. What if you have two? You'd need just maybe put a comma here. Just say my num, and you just put this on a different position in the argument. And I forgot this. So it kind of placed the age on the first one, my num to the second one. Really cool, right? Let's try that out. Cargo run. There it is. My num is 54. Next step is modifying these variables. So Rust has this thing called immutable by default. Everything a variable is immutable by default. You cannot do something like this. Like my num, you can set it to 50. Sorry, I'm too used to WQ. It will throw an error, and as you can see, this really the thing that I like about Rust is that it gives you really informative errors. So it kind of tells you like, oh, is maybe severing being read. Cannot assign twice to an immutable variable. Assign it to my num because it kind of already tells you what to do. Consider making this binding mutable. So in Rust, variables are immutable by default. This is to kind of make your program use less memory, because if you had mutable memories, it would allocate the memory to a thing called the heap. So here we're kind of storing the variable in a place called the stack variable. So the stack is like the function stack. As we create h, the h got pushed into the stack and got pulled out on this thing. Then my num gets pushed and gets printed out. But then since it's on the stack, its size is kind of fixed and it's already known at compile time. So you can kind of change it to another value. It's like 50 because it's immutable, you can't change it. One thing you can do is use the keyword mute to make it mutable. I'm sorry to use stuff. So as you do this, let's print this num again on the bottom. We see that my num has successfully been modified. That's the very simplest thing they can do in Rust. There's also if statements. For example, I have my age. If age is less than something like 16, let's print out So for example, here you'd have some kind of age restricted movie where they have some scenes that wouldn't be appropriate for kids or under the age of 16. So you can do something like this. If age is less than 16, then print this. If else, you print this. It's really similar to the ones you use in many mainstream languages. It's just the difference is that Rust doesn't use the parentheses. It kind of gives you a way to put the expression like right away after the if keyword. Then you can just do anything you want with it. There's also an if else statement, as you'd expect. I meant else if. For example, you wouldn't have an age that is over 100, so you check else if age is over 100. So you'd say invalid age. This is not a real world example. It's just me showing how the else if looks like. It does the same as if. It doesn't have any parentheses and it just comes in really well. Can run this Cargo run and you can see playing the movie because we're 100. Well, what if we 101? Invalid age. But if we're too young, for example, 5-year-old, I don't know why would a 5-year-old want to watch a movie. Yep, you're too young. Works as expected. Another thing is the for statement. Another thing interesting about Rust is that it has this range statement that allows you to give kind of a range of from a number to a number. This could be a variable. For example, I've let be 30 here. You could just do b something like this, but yeah. As you save this, run it, and then it loops perfectly. But if you want to have this range to be inclusive, for example, you want the 30 to get added, you can just do this. It's kind of a weird syntax, I can agree. Oh wait, no. Wrong position. Sorry, I forgot to. It includes 30. As you can see, it became inclusive. Really simple, really easy. There's also this while statement. a very simple code that demonstrates the while operator. So we have the variable b that with the value 30, and we check while b is 30, we execute this variable. So for seeing from this line would only get executed once. Oh wait, I forgot to make this variable immutable. Yep, while it's 30, and that's it pretty much. You could do regular boolean operators, something like b is something like less than 30 and more than c. For example, we have in range for 10 times, as you would see. Pretty simple, pretty easy. I guess that's pretty much all I could talk about Rust. It's not much, it's really simple. It's like the basic that you would need to know to kind of kickstart your Rust curiosity. Yeah, there's a lot more into Rust, like the borrow checker, a lot more statements such as the match statement. It's like the if let statement. So in Rust you could do something like if let, which is really weird, but it kind of makes sense when you've used it, and it's really useful. There's also a lot more functions like closures, unsafe, safety, and all of that stuff. But that's pretty much all I could show about Rust in this tutorial, because I don't have very much time and it's getting way over my time limit. But anyway, I guess that's all from me. Good luck learning Rust, and I'll see you later. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.